Welcome to this week's Starting Points video, the video designed to get you prepared for this upcoming new comic book day. In this series, I go through ongoing series starting new arcs, new series worth your time, and graphic novels being released. My hope is whether you're a Wednesday warrior or someone who's reading comics for the first time, you'll be well prepared for your comic book trip this Wednesday. To start things off, we're going to take a look at graphic novels being released. Coming out this week is one of the best looking series of the entire year, ISIL Volume 1. The visuals in this series have been jaw-droppingly gorgeous, especially the colors. They've been luscious, full of life, and do a lot to make this world feel well realized. I tend to relate this series a lot to something like Princess Mononoke or other Hayao Miyazaki films because it drops you into this world, doesn't give you much in lines of exposition, but lets you figure things out as the story goes, and it does take some time for that story to get developed, but by the end you realize how much imagination went into this narrative, and it's rather impressive. This is only the first 5 issues, but this series is set to come back early next year, so if you want to catch up before that happens, this is a great opportunity to do just that. Recently, DC and Vertigo have been bringing back the Sandman universe in a major way, with new series by new creators that expand upon the classic Sandman universe. If you're the type of person that really wanted to read those series but were hesitant because you've never read a Sandman book before, don't worry, as this week, this first volume of Sandman gets re-released. Now, Sandman is noted of being one of the greatest comic books of all time, and deservingly so. However, it didn't get there right away. The first volume is good, but doesn't necessarily hit the heights of the series later on. However, it does contain, in my opinion, one of the greatest single issues of all time. It is fun, too, just seeing Neil Gaiman figure things out to get to what will eventually become the Sandman we know and love. Now, this new release also doesn't necessarily include anything new compared to previous releases. However, it does have a cool new cover, so there is that. Sidekick characters like Robin and Bucky Barnes have morphed into some of comics' most popular and best characters, but not all sidekicks share that fate. That's where Jonathan Morris's new book, The League of Regrettable Sidekicks, comes in. This examines the original sidekick phenomenon, looking in at some of the strangest and wackiest incarnations that existed, not just with Marvel and DC, but some of the publishers that have long since been forgotten. It also asks the question how important sidekicks were to comic book storytelling. If you're the type of person that enjoys comic book history, especially the pieces of history that are not talked about nearly as much as it should be, this book looks like an opportunity to dive into some forgotten pieces of what made comic books what they are today. The last graphic novel I'll be talking about is a hardcover edition of James Bond: The Body, and this is published by Dynamite Comics. I know when people hear about licensed books, there's a knee-jerk reaction to just assume it's nothing more than a cash grab, and often that is the case. To Dynamite's credit, their James Bond books have been quite good, and James Bond: The Body is no different. This is written by Alex Cott, who came up with the idea of breaking down James Bond to his most essential elements. Each installment covers a different specific part of James Bond, from the body to the heart to the mind. It may sound like a gimmick, and it is, but it's a gimmick that works and really gets into what's essentially making James Bond such an iconic character. If you're the type of person that haven't been a fan of the recent James Bond films, or you are a huge James Bond fan, this is an ideal read. Or if you ever wondered, why do people care about James Bond? This helps answer that question. Alright, we're going to move on to ongoing series starting new arc, starting with Action Comics 1004. And this isn't necessarily a brand new arc, but a new chapter in the world of Superman. Lois Lane is returning from space, and Jonathan Kent is not with her. Her and Superman have a conversation that is designed to redefine what their relationship will be moving forward. What will that new definition be? Will they still be married? Will they not be? Will people be angry at Brian Michael Bendis more so than usual? Time will tell, but this seems to be a key issue that's going to set up a new status quo for the Superman universe moving forward. Next on the list is Titans number 28, and this is a new storyline for Titans, but it's not a new storyline for DC Comics, as it ties into Drowned Earth, the event that's been going on in both Aquaman, Justice League, and now Titans. In it, former Titans member Tempest returns to the team for reasons we're not sure of. They could be for bad, they could be for evil. All things are crazy right now in the world of Aquaman and Atlantia. Now, I know that when I have a tie-in like this to a major event, some people want to skip it, and how much it's going to impact the overall arching Drowned Earth storyline is unclear. It could have a major impact, it may not. We'll have to wait and see, but if you're a completist that wants to read every bit and piece of this story, you're going to want to pick up this issue. Alright, we're going to move over now to Marvel titles starting new arcs, starting with The Amazing Spider-Man number 8. This is titled The Heist of the Century, which is done by the Thieves Guilds of New York, which are perhaps new characters, perhaps not. That's unclear. We're not sure who they are, but either is Spider-Man, and he's dying to find out. And this has been one of Marvel's best books since the Fresh Start began, as Nick Spencer just works well with this book. His sense of humor and Peter Parker are nearly exact, as they're really good at telling bad jokes. I do miss the fact that Ryan Ottley is not on art, but Roberto Ramos also brings something special. If you gave up on Spider-Man over the last few years and wanted to jump on board, this series, especially this new issue, provides you that opportunity. Moon Knight has a very special anniversary this week with the release of issue number 200. This looks to celebrate the history of a character that is unlike anything else in Marvel. I know Moon Knight is not the name brand of a character like Iron Man or Spider-Man, but for some reason he does attract some amazing creators like Jeff Lemire and Warren Ellis, who have both crafted some insanely good runs for the character. I'm not sure where Max Bemis' run currently lines up compared to theirs, but I will say it's unlike any other title Marvel puts out on the stands right now, and with some of the stuff he gets away with, I do wonder if Marvel even knows it exists. Let's just say eating a dolphin is one of the major scenes in the last few issues. And if you're a person that has always wondered, well, what makes Moon Knight special? Why would critters like that come to the character of Moon Knight? This issue looks to kind of encompass his history in a Cliff Knight's version. Also, if your person has not been keeping up with Moon Knight but were a fan of the past, this issue is set to bring back some fan favorite characters, so it is doing what an anniversary issue should do: celebrate the old and look forward to the new. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Macros series is a 4-issue series that has each issue focusing on a different Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. The first issue focused on Donatello, my personal favorite turtle. This issue focuses on Michelangelo, and I know Michelangelo tends to be pegged as a comic book relief character. However, this is looking to make him more of a complete character, looking at the relationship between him and Splinter, his pseudo-father figure. Now, this does have some tie-ins to the current IDW series, but I did read the first issue, and even though I have not necessarily been keeping up with that book, I was able to follow it well enough, so hopefully that will be the same case for this installment. Alright, well, let's move over to new series debuting this week, starting with Black Panther versus Deadpool number 1, and I know what this seems like, right? You have a character like Deadpool and Black Panther coming together because they both had huge films, they're both very popular, so let's put them in a book and it'll sell well. Maybe that's the case, but why I'm excited for it is because of the creator behind it, Daniel Kibblesmith, who I feel like is a writer on the rise. Earlier this year, he wrote for Valiant Comics in the series Quantum and Woody, and that actually should bode well for this book. It has a similar concept where you have a straightforward character with a more comedic off-the-wall character, and that classic straight man versus the wacky sidekick. And it worked well for Quantum and Woody, so maybe it will work well for this. He's worked with Marvel as well on Lockjaw, which was a charming book about everyone's favorite teleporting dog. He has great comedic chops because he's also worked on shows like The Tonight Show with Stephen Colbert, so clearly he has the ability to elicit laughter, and considering this idea and this concept, it should bode well for this series. Old Lady Harley debuts this week, and just saying that title, I do have this negative knee-jerk reaction, but I think it's important to give every book an opportunity because you never know what can be good. When I heard about the idea of doing an Old Man Hawkeye series, I was dismissive because I didn't think we really needed to return to the Old Man Logan universe, especially considering the Old Man Logan was existing in the normal Marvel universe. However, that series was turned out to be great with fantastic art, so maybe this series can be great as well. And being Harley, at least it'll be a little bit more fun and engaging than the dour series like an Old Man Logan or Hawkeye. This is written by Frank Thierry, who has plenty of experience writing Harley, so maybe this change of pace and this change of location and time will allow him to take Harley into new directions that are desperately needed for the character. Out this week is The Whispering Dark number 1, and this is a situation where I have really no experience with the comic book creators behind this. However, I'm really interested in it because of the concept. It's about an army pilot who gets shot down behind enemy lines. I'm always in favor of that type of story, but to make things extra special, there's an additional supernatural bonus. It's said to take ideas and themes you would find in things like Apocalypse Now and mix it with the world of H.P. Lovecraft, and that's a combination that I'm willing to give a chance. I also love finding a book that comes absolutely out of nowhere, and I think this has the opportunity of doing just that. Aftershock is one of those publishers, well, I'll give anything they debut at least one chance, perhaps even a few issues, and this week sees a release of Dead Kings #1. This is written by Steve Orlando, who is a comic book veteran. He's done a lot of work, especially for DC. One of my favorite titles that he's written is Midnighter, for example, but this book seems to be very different both in style and concept, existing more in a science fiction, fantasy type of world. Actually, that seems to be the basis of this world, as it takes place in a post-apocalyptic universe that is dealing with the aftermath of the techno-magic world. And based upon the description alone, it does seem like a book that has a lot going on, and I'm just curious to see what a world like that will look like. Each week I like to pick my all ages book of the week, and this week it goes to Marvel Superhero Adventures Captain Marvel Halloween Spooktacular #1, which is one mouthful to say, and there are many reasons to be excited for this book, and one of the biggest is its writer, Jeff Loveless, who comes in with quite the pedigree. He's had been nominated for a Primetime Emmy, has worked on such television shows as The Office and Jimmy Kimmel Live, and has written some pretty good comic books as well, such as Judas and Nova. Considering the hype for next year's Captain Marvel movie, it being Halloween season, it does seem like the perfect storm for this book to be appreciated not only by children, but adults as well. The new series I'm probably looking forward to most this week is Mars Attacks #1, and I know on the surface that might seem kind of weird. They're making a comic book based upon that weird Tim Burton movie with those aliens that talked all odd. That movie was awful. Well, I'm one of the few people that maybe like that film. However, it's been decades since I've seen it, so I don't know if it's technically held up all that well, but this is another situation where I'm excited for this book because of the creator behind it, that being Kyle Starks. And I've been a huge fan of a lot of his work, including Rock Candy Mountain and Sex Castle, which is an actual graphic novel, not a weird location, but also some of his licensed books that he's worked on, like Rick and Morty and Dead of Winter. I think this might be a situation where his sensibilities will lend to this book so well, it will actually improve upon the original property. Well, we've reached the end of this week's video, which brings, of course, me to my pick of the week. This week, it is Abbott trade paperback, which collects each issue of this mini-series. And this is an incredible series, but to be honest, after the first issue, I was a little bit hesitant, almost disappointed. Now, don't get me wrong, I was loving the world it was building. I loved the take on 1960s Detroit. It was gritty, true to life. Abbott was this journalist who was going after the social and political issues of the day that even felt relevant for today's world as well. However, by the end of the first issue, this supernatural element comes into play, and I was really concerned that would take over the book and take away from what made the book unique. It was unlike anything else on the shelves, but once you put in a magical element, it just feels like everything else. Well, you know what? Sometimes you're wrong, and sometimes you have to admit to be wrong, and I was incredibly wrong. By the end of this series, it ended up being fantastic. Nothing was taken away. It just made it a stronger book, and Abbott an even stronger character. I also have to point out the art in this series. This is a week with a lot of great art, like I've mentioned, from ISIL, but there's not a book more creative when it came to art than Sammy Cavella's art for this. His panel design was one of the best parts of this series. I love picking up a book, not knowing what it's going to look like, not knowing what each page is going to look like, the different approaches to storytelling, and that happened in this series. And I know this is a big week with a lot of books to talk about, a lot of books to read, and if you only could pick one, that's why this is my book of the week, because it seems to have everything. It has a great story, a great character, and great art. Everything you want in a comic book. And my only hope for this series is we get more of it, that Sully Ahmad and Sammy Cavella come back together again for this book, because it does leave the story open-ended enough that you can have Abbott Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, and she was a strong enough character to really support that as well. But like I mentioned, it's the end of this week's video. So let me know what you thought of this. What are some books that you'll be picking up? Any books that you'll be picking up because of this video? What are some starting points for you? What are some comics that are coming out that I simply did not talk about? Let me know in the comment sections below. If there's anything next week that you think I should include in my video, anything that you're really excited about, again, let me know. And keep tuned to GeekCast Radio, as we have a lot going on. We have some major events, including right now, if you go to GeekCast Radio, you'll see we have our current wrestling tournament going, where we're trying to figure out what is the greatest wrestling tag team of all time. Also, that's leading into our top 100, which is our top 100 wrestlers of all time. And if you're excited about that idea and want to read and listen to some of our previous top 100s, go ahead and do that. You go to GeekCast Radio. We've had top 100s on animated films, animated TV shows, 100 top heroes of all time from last year, which was probably my personal favorite one that we did. Again, it's just us talking, having a good time. It's not definitive. It's like this list. It's just about the opportunity to have a conversation about some random thing. So, but like I said, I like to end each video by saying comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one, and I really hope this video helps you find that right one.